Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins production diary. My name is Audie Ratliff and I am right now cleaning up the bench because I have some people bringing a older mandolin that I built down to have some frets put in it, and so they should be here in about an hour or so. So I'm trying to get the exam table ready and clean everything off. I don't really have a whole lot of stuff on a locked-in job jar list or a set of goals for this week. We're just going to pick up in the big room where we left off last week, some backs on the remaining mandolins in the batch, and then the rest of the week will probably be spent with putting on fingerboard extenders and fingerboards and in general cleaning up. We've got that R5 master model that will have to have binding put on the back when we get the back on it. So it's going to be a week of just kind of hodgepodge jobs with no really set goals except to just make progress in these areas. So having said that, as always, I'm just going to carry the camera around with me this week, and if I see anything that seems to be worth recording and sharing, that's what I'll do. But for now, I'm going to finish this bench up and get it ready for my visitors. How about we put the back on that R5 master model I was telling you about? It is a F-style master model, all the bells and whistles on it, and we have chosen bird's eye maple for it. So I have a roughed out back, and the body is more or less ready to put the back on. So let's follow the steps that it takes to go from a roughed out back and a ready body all the way up to gluing the back on. Let's do that. So let's start right here. The mandolin is already assembled. The top and the head block is already has the scroll part sawn out, and the neck is on the mandolin as well. Now it's time to saw this scroll part out right here, and then glue everything, get everything, all of the little steps it takes to get it ready, and then glue the back on. And that's the number one job, is get that sawn out. So I built this little tray that will hold this back so that the gluing surface is level, and anything we saw here will be straight up and down and square. And so with that being said, we'll go right here. Now I won't be able to go all the way around because the body of the saw will stop me, but I'll get 95% of it, and then I'll show you how I proceed from that point on. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but the right here is the body of the saw, keeps this back from being all the way around. And I'm assuming that you can see that. And then I turn the saw off, because if you try to back out of this cut with the saw running, you just pull the blade off the wheel. So just like that right there. Now I'm going to get the other line. And basically the same thing. I've stopped the saw because the cut off piece, the waste piece, is stuck down in there, so you kind of have to jiggle it out. Right there it is. Now, how are we going to proceed from here? Well, follow me. Okay, so we're mostly cut out there. I take a circle gauge and just lay it right up here and pick the appropriate size, but it's usually, circle I use is usually about a 5/8 will do it. but that would vary occasionally from mandolin to mandolin. And I just kind of guess around there till everything looks good. And my eyeball tells me that that's going to match what's on the back pretty close. Now it goes back to the saw. Now, believe it or not, the difference in length from this point to this part here and the different and this part here is about 5/8 or 3/4 of an inch difference, is all that I need to be able to swing this back around here and clear the body, the mandolin back on the body of the saw, and it'll come right on around now, and we can just finish up this scroll just as pretty as you please. Okay, let's talk about where to go from this point right here. I need two things. I need to make sure that the inside is exactly shaped the way I want it to be, and the other side. Thing number 2 is the outside. Now, I do usually like to cut just a little bit out from here before I glue the thing on and kind of hollow out the scroll just a little bit. I don't feel comfortable doing that until I've got the outside pretty much shaped the way I want it shaped. So I'm already happy with the fact that I've got this slope, no huge humps or dips in it. This slope is pretty good. All we really have to do now is just to carve the scroll out and make sure this whole area right here is more or less level, like this side on this, on this side, well, it's kind of match on this side. And then all of the scroll carvings kind of flow very smoothly and pretty into those surfaces. So what I normally do is carve the outside scroll, get it rough. It doesn't have to be to its final dimensions, just kind of close and all roughed in and everything. And then we'll work on the inside once the outside kind of gives us an idea of how deep we can go on the inside, if that makes any sense. If it don't, it will here in just a few minutes. So right now I'm going to carve the outside scroll. Now I have sort of a special jig table thing that I use to do this job with, and I'll explain it to you. It locks into a bench vise. It's just basically one board lag bolted down to another, and then that's the part that goes in the bench vise. So I basically just have a floating table kind of thing. I have some holes drilled in one end just so that I can put whatever chisels, gouges, and files and that sort of thing as a holder. And I don't know if you can see it here, but I have some slots cut, and I use those to hold scrapers. And then on this end of this board I have some pins in that the mandolin back or top will fit in, just like that right there. It kind of locks them into place. And then should I want to turn this over and work on the inside, which is exactly what's going to happen here in a few minutes, I have this right here, this ring that fits down on those same pins, and that thing will sit more or less level. And I try to hold everything in place with just big spring clamps. And I can, and it works. It was just a little more aggravating to use, but these slots right here were originally cut on both sides to put in violin spool clamps. And that works, but it's just quicker to throw these spring clamps on them, just like that right there. But that's how that works. So we are going to lock this thing down right now and carve this scroll out. First thing I'm going to do is there are 2 different elevations here from this high point to this low point here, and you want this to be a gradual slope all the way down. And I'm simply going to rough that in with a sander pad on the end of a drill and a light that lets me see that slope pretty well. Now, having done that with the sander, it's not really all that level, but it's a lot closer than it was. I'm gonna, when you do use the sander, kind of get a little part right there that needs to come out. So I'm going to take that out. So that's not in the way. And then I'm going to check the thickness of the top, back right in here, and it's pretty good. And then we want to more or less lay a straight edge right along this line here and make sure that we don't have a rock like that right there. And if I do, I'm just going to take a rasp and cut it down. Okay, so now I have this. Basically, if this was an A model, I'd just cut this part off and it'd be pretty much shaped the way you want it. Nice and symmetrical and not too much in the way of bad humps and stuff. And sometimes you got a little bit of ledge, and I do right there as we go from one plane over to the other. So I'm going to take the scrapers and just kind of work those little humps out. And now I've kind of got at least down the center line of this scroll, I've got a nice smooth fall, rough but smooth, if that makes any sense. Not too much in the way of humps. Right down the middle, where the crest of that scroll will be, is a pretty nice fall before it starts to slope back up on the back itself. So I'm good right there. Now I want to define the outside thickness of this top. It needs to be the same size as the binding, so usually I have a high spot right in here. I'm going to pencil a line right there, and then over here I'm going to pencil a line from the low part here all the way up to the high part there, so it's just a gradually climbing line, which would be basically the top part where the binding would go, the shape of the neck, or the shape of the back, I guess. I'll show you here. Okay, I think this will make sense. See that thickness right there? That inked line. I get it in focus. And then around here, same thing. It goes from being pretty thin right in here all the way up to that high level right there. It is now time to mark where I want the crest of the scroll to be on this back. I usually do that by making two lines like this. And then closing the compass up. Around here, well, let's see, probably be a little tighter than that. Yeah, start there, and then just more or less eyeballing and splitting the difference. This one usually comes out and then just starts to gradually work its way away from that width right there until it comes in. something like that. When I get it where I want it, then I'll use an ink pen, erase all these pencil lines. Well, there you go. Now I've got a couple of gouges, an in canal and an out canal. One ground on the inside, one ground on the outside. I like these things. I'm going to try to carve a swoop or a concave thing out down to these pencil lines that you saw me put in just a second ago. And nice even fall here from this high point to this low point here on this plane. And so that's how, now it's just hand carving. Now the inside here has been roughed out. You see everything is nice and more or less shaped, just gouge marks, which in a few minutes I'll take out with the round scraper. But first I've got to do the outside now. Okay, so the scroll is basically carved. It's still very, very rough and all like that, but we're within just a hair's breadth of the final dimensions, and so really all it needs is just smoothing up rather than shaping. Now let's talk about this really wide ledge that I have right here on, you can see I don't normally have that wide a ledge on a Country Boy, but an R5 Master model will have 3-ply binding, which is pretty wide, and there's still top to trim off after this gets glued onto the sides. So I like to leave a lot more than is absolutely necessary so that I can take this swoop down here and just bring it up to the edge of the binding when I have the binding installed, wherever it winds up at. And so the last thing you want is to have the binding come all the way over to this point and you don't have any wood meat to put the binding into. So I'll always leave this ledge a little thicker and then just put the binding in, and it'll probably it'll wind up somewhere like right in there, in that area. But just to be safe, I've left plenty here, and then I'll just take that little ridge and cut it off until I get up to the edge of the binding. But that's neither here nor there. So now let's discuss, I'm happy with the outside. Now let's discuss what we're going to do on the inside. Now, I mentioned this whole area here and all these lines were straightened out and everything for a reason, because I'm getting ready to drill on the inside here to kind of accommodate this shape right here. And I'm going to drill the thickness of the back in the center, which is 7/32, or that's at least where we started at when it was rough. And I want it to be that 7/32 all the way out to the very edge, and then as it swoops up to the thickness, no thickness at all actually, or this plane that rests on this head block. So how am I going to do that? And I'm going to do that just like this right here. I'm going to sprinkle sawdust down on the inside. Put this back on very, very carefully because I've got overhang. I have to make sure that I'm exactly where I want to be. So I very carefully put everything on the center line, and then just tap that sawdust down until hopefully it rests on that head block. Let's see how we've done. Now, as you can see, that kerf lining, the whole head block is perfectly outlined there. All I have to do, I can even see where the kerfing is on this side, for the most part anyway. So all I have to do is just come here just on the inside of that sawdust. Pencil all that. And strengthen those lines up, and I know exactly where I can touch and exactly where I cannot. And now we're going to go to the drill press. Now the depth stop on this drill press is set pretty much right at the exact depth or the thickness of that back right there. So I'm just going to drill holes. And come back to my jig here. This time I'm going to put that ring on, put this back in, and you can see just how much material needs to come out of here to make this thickness the same as that thickness. And I'm going to do that, the bulk of it anyway, with the trusty drill and with the sander pad on it. So now the back is a lot less stiff than it was, especially right in here. And hopefully it's going to be a better vibrator and sound producer and all that kind of stuff. So that's the whole idea behind taking all of that bulk out right there in that area. It doesn't need to be there. There's no reason for it to be there. And that takes it out. Now I'm going to address this area right here. This is that little area between the head block and the kerfing. And I usually take this round scraper and just cut that down just like that right there until that round scraper basically fits down in there and touches both lines. Okay, so I've got that put in there. Let's see if I can show you what I'm talking about. There, see, that's pretty much that depth. And so that's some more weight that's been taken out of this, and hopefully it'll sound a little better because of that. Okay, so now I've got everything basically shaped the way I want it to be, and so we are going to just work our way down through the grits of sandpaper, starting with probably 60 grit on this really, really rough stuff. Now moving on to 80 to 100 to 150, down to about 220 grit paper, and then once I get everything cleaned up really nicely, and any humps, bumps, or anything that I don't like will be gotten out, then this thing will be ready to glue on to that mandolin. And that pretty much glues the back on this R5 Master model made out of bird's eye maple, and its eventual home will be in Idaho, I believe. So the next step will be tomorrow, of course. We'll trim this back off and start the binding channel, which will take probably the rest of the week to do one piece at a time, of course. And then in the downtime after that, we'll go into the other room where all of the other mandolins are hanging, and I will pick a job, say clean the sides off to 100 grit, and I'll try to do all of those before I, pick another job, clean, shape the heel or whatever. So that'll pretty much be the rest of my week will be spent putting the binding or working on the binding channel for this thing, and then just taking the other mandolins and trying to bring them all up to the next stage of completion. And so I'll check back with you later if there's anything worth showing, and we'll leave it at that for the moment. Well, it's been one of those weeks. It's Friday afternoon, and I have spun my wheels on several occasions this week and not got a whole lot done. I still don't have the first piece of binding on that R5 Master model. Other things that happened this week, I had to help my mother with some banking business, so I had to spend pretty much a whole afternoon going up to Kingsport to help her with that. One day I had lunch with a friend at a Mexican restaurant. One day the neighbors called me and said they had a small tree down in their yard. Did I have a chainsaw and could I help them out? So I went over there and helped them out with that and got some free firewood as well. And I also, that day, I went to my local music store here again in Kingsport and bought some strings for my little T-play mandolin and found a case, surprisingly enough, that instrument would fit down in. And I was thrilled to bits to find just a store-bought case that, and I was afraid I was going to have to build a case for it. So like I said, a lot of spinning your wheels and not getting very far, but at the same time, I got some stuff done. So I'm going to take this opportunity real quickly to close this video off. Hope you've enjoyed it. Come back and check with me next week and see what we get into next week. And until then, my name is Audie, and we'll see you in the next round.